Hello, welcome back to All for United WFC. Another Lionesses win. The match reactions are not going to stop. We thought, are we going to have to stop them after the group stage? But no, we are going to keep going because England have progressed and looking like it. They could go all the way. Yeah, so we might be doing a couple more match reactions on top of that. But I've got Ashley and Rob joining me to talk through everything from yesterday's 5-0 win. That's another, I think that's 14 now, isn't it, in the tournament now? So yeah, England looking very strong, but we got a lot to get into. Unchanged lineup. Talk obviously Frank Kirby's off the mark now. Beth Mead, I mean, what can you say about her? Obviously, and Russo as well. And lots of things to get into. Before we get into all the Lionesses stuff, I will just want to put a big thank you out there because as people who follow the channel, we've been pushing for 500 subscribers before the end of the tournament. And we've had quite a few big shout-outs recently. Obviously, from the men's account have really pushed this as well. Not only in the last 48 hours have we hit 500, but we've actually eclipsed that and gone for 600. And we're actually over the 600 mark now as well. So, I mean, I'm a little bit lost for words as people in the AFU group chat found it last night. So, yeah, just a massive thanks to everyone who's subscribed, liked the video, watched the videos, whatever it is, over the last few months. It's greatly appreciated. So, now that's all out of the way. We'll dive straight into it then. I want to come to you, Ashley, first on just your initial reaction, I guess, to the game. Before we dive into specifics and things like that, obviously, just your initial reaction when you saw the lineup, the game itself, and all things in between.
Well, I thought the game, I was thinking we'd go into the game quite strong anyway. Whether she changed the lineup or not, I still thought we'd win. So when I saw that it was unchanged, I thought, okay, she actually means business. Like, she actually wants to just go out all out and, finish the group as strong as they started it off. I think when the game first started, I thought Northern Ireland did quite well. I mean, they held us quite well. We couldn't really break them down, or if we did, it was like shots from range. I think that the goalie was just easily catching or making decent saves. But then, obviously, Frank Kirby stepped up and did what she does best at Chelsea, and then Beth Mead followed up not long after, and then I think the game was just put to bed then, and it was just a case of how many can we score, really.
I think that was always going to be the thing, wasn't it, Rob? That once England got, I think, the first goal, it was always going to be floodgates open from there. But like I said, before we dive into specifics, Rob, your just kind of initial reaction to that 5-0 win yesterday.
Sort of, I don't want to say pretty standard now because I think everything's important, but at the same time, I think probably pretty standard in all honesty. We knew that England were better than Northern Ireland. We knew that we had the superior squad. We knew we weren't going to really rotate. And yeah, sort of as a result of that, we stayed very strong and got sort of, the result that the performance merited. And I think it was, can't really argue with that, really.
You said there something about the lineup, and that was actually my first question to each of you in terms of it was unchanged. Now, I don't know about you, but obviously I was down in Brighton yesterday, and everyone that was sat around us when that lineup came out, we were all like, really? Like, we thought we would have rotated a little bit. Now, obviously, you don't want to rotate fully. You lose momentum and things like that. But Ashley, coming to you, were you surprised that it was completely unchanged? That, I mean, like I said, it might be a good thing. The momentum keeps going, but also can fatigue play into this? I know she took a couple off at half time, but were you surprised that it was completely unchanged?
I think I was, to be fair. I mean, I was expecting Williamson and probably Roebuck to still start because Williamson's captain and Roebuck hasn't really had anything to do across the tournament. And if she has, she's saved it pretty comfortably. But, I thought she would have rested, say, Lucy Bronze and Ellen White, for example, the players Lauren Hemp, who could be key going forward. That's the one, sorry, Mary Earps. Yeah, sorry. Earps. I think that they did, they would be okay to start, but Hemp, Bronze, and people like that, I thought maybe she could have rested them. I mean, Lucy Bronze did get clipped on the back of the leg and she went down holding a knee. And I thought, if she hadn't have played her, because I think after that she didn't look the same. I didn't think she had her best game. So it kind of one of them. But it kind of showed her intent as a manager that she doesn't want to change anything. And, she was happy with how the team had played and she wanted to keep the momentum going forward as well, maybe. It was hard to tell because she wasn't there. So they couldn't really ask her at the end, about the unchanged lineup unless they did any interviews with her like remotely today that I haven't seen yet. But it was interesting. But I think obviously it worked, and she made the same subs that she has been, and it all worked out right in the end.
I mean, Rob, same question to yourself, really, then, because I don't know, I would have expected a few. After, it's not like we hadn't topped the group at that point. We'd already topped the group, beat Norway convincingly.
Mm-hmm.
Even with I think you could have rotated the whole team and we would have still been Northern Ireland 5-0, I think. So I think the bench is that strong. But so I guess, were you surprised? Would you have rested a couple of them? Maybe not wholesale changes in there.
Potentially, although, again, I'm not a Euros winning manager, so I find it very, very hard, and I've said this to a couple of them, I find it very hard to criticise what Sarina Wiegman's doing, because at the moment it's not like, for example, Gareth Southgate, where Southgate's made things that I think are clear errors, and that's resulted in, certain games going the way they've gone. At the moment with Sarina Wiegman, I think, has she lost a game yet since taking charge? I don't think so. We haven't conceded a lot of goals. The performance against Norway, I think, was probably one of the most complete performances I've seen ever in football, across the men and the women's game. I was a bit surprised there wasn't a little bit of rotation, just purely to give players chances to play at the Euros, because I think that's, quite an important thing from a mental perspective. But at the same time, I think Sarina made it quite clear when she did a press conference before she sort of had COVID that, she wasn't going to go for wholesale rotation. There wasn't going to be big changes. Whether it's right or not, we just have to see, I suppose. I mean, like, if we look tired and fatigued in the quarters and the semis, maybe that's when you can challenge it. But at the same time, you'd hope these players, there's quite a gap, at least till the quarterfinal. You'd hope these players are staying fresh. They're going through the conditioning period. And without being unkind to Northern Ireland, the pace of the game yesterday wasn't exactly, 90 miles per hour. It wasn't as intense as perhaps maybe the first half against Norway was. And even then, the second half against Norway, I think, the tempo dropped dramatically. So I think you've got to sort of factor all of that in. I will say I was a little bit surprised that there weren't certain players like Daly and Bronze, who are, the undisputed first choices in their relevant positions, rested, because I think that's the sort of thing where when you lose key players in those roles, there's less depth in the squad. There's not an obvious player. I mean, Jess Carter, I think, is a very, very good player, but I don't think she's the same on the level of Lucy Bronze. I don't think that's an unfair thing to say. In the same way, I think Alex Greenwood's a very good player, but I don't think she offers the same profile as Daly from that left-back position. So I was a little surprised they didn't maybe get rest, but at the same time, players want to play and, they want to have as much chance as possible to play.
Yeah, I think Marty's almost backing up your point there in terms of, Norway was easier than expected. The energy, the England squad haven't, I said this before we went live, haven't fully been tested yet. They haven't need to go on, fully flat out in a game. So fitness at the moment, like you said, if we get to the quarterfinals and they look shattered, you could probably go, hang on, should she have rotated a little bit? But I think at the moment, I don't think it's too big of a thing. I just have to bring that up because that's what the talking point was before the game. And to be fair, I think if you think back to her kind of Dutch days, I don't think she rotated there either. It was pretty much, this is the 11, these are the subs. It was very, she knew what she wanted before, going into pretty much every game.
I think I'm correct in saying she used the least number of players ever to win the Euros. I think I've seen that stat at some point. She used something like 16 players out of the entire squad. And in a way, I can kind of understand that, because if you've got, if you've got a winning formula, why sort of change it, in all honesty? And that also comes in, I think, to, the selections aspect of it, and the arguments people will make about selections is that you can look at it and also say, well, players didn't actually score yesterday, but it wasn't as if they had bad performances. I don't think through the group stage, and again, Ash, I'd be curious to know your opinion on this, is there any players you think throughout the group stage who particularly haven't had, at least one performance where you think, yeah, they're ready and yeah, they're sort of there?
In terms of anyone who's had like a bad performance or had a performance that they need, like that they deserve to be.
Yeah, well, you say actually, realistically, should they be in, the starting 11? Because I find it very hard to, expect Earps obviously aside, because I don't think she's really been tested.
Yeah.
I don't think of anyone in the sort of, the rest of the 10 who you look at and think actually, they've not produced at least one very good performance.
I think it's hard to say, as we were saying, because England haven't really been tested. Or like the defence haven't really been tested. Like there was a bit of thing about, whether Williamson would play in the holding midfielder role and Greenwood would play with Bright like there was in some of the friendlies. But like, it's hard to judge it because we haven't really been tested against a world-class opposition. I mean, everyone thought Norway had tested us like massive, but in the end they didn't. And I don't think anyone's had a bad performance, but you can't really describe us as a bad performance because we've won every game at the moment. So I think we'll have to wait and see who we have to play from the group tonight, and then how we get on again. If it's like Denmark, for example, their attack is a bit better than as we say on paper, it's better and probably arguably as good as Norway's, but it just depends how it goes on the day. But I think they're all professional footballers in different leagues across the country, across the world, and stuff like that. So realistically, they should all be ready for a tournament, and that's why I think Wiegman just stuck with who she knew. That was the team she was going to go for, and then she knows she's got world-class options on the bench too.
Yeah, and I've left that comment on screen, Marty, because I'm going to nick that and use it at another point, because I think that is the best analogy there. When your offense or your attack is running on all cylinders, you don't throw a wrench in it. Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy. Speaking about the attack, the first goal obviously did come, and Rob texted me at halftime saying that's why Kirby's in the team, or that's why Kirby should start. I can't remember the exact terminology. So I'll start with you, Rob, on this one. It was a nice finish into the top corner there. She's obviously got her Euros, officially kind of off and running now. Obviously your text said it all. That's why she starts. Do you think that's maybe the start of a couple of goals for her now? And just your kind of thoughts on her performance, because obviously there was worries about her fitness coming into the tournament. Serena's obviously stuck with her. It seems to be that rotation. Kirby plays up until, obviously, apart yesterday aside. Obviously, Tooney came on at half time, but other than that, it's been pretty similar. Kirby plays 55-60. Tooney comes on for the last half an hour. Yeah. But do you think that's the way to go? And obviously, Kirby's performance yesterday as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try not to show my Chelsea bias here, but I do think Fran Kirby, when she's fully fit, she is on another level to a lot of players, both in her technical ability, but I think also her selflessness. She's got something that's very rare in a player, in that if there is players in better positions, she will always try and pick a teammate out. She won't, go for glory. There are times where I do think that's a bit frustrating, and that I do think she's got the ability to shoot more. Like, Fran Kirby is the sort of player that fully fit can deliver you 10 to 15 goals very easily in the season. But I think there was one earlier in the game before that where she had the ball just inside the box, just on sort of the edge of the 6-yard box, and she played a brilliant ball across the box when everyone thought she was shaping to sort of shoot and curl into the corner. And I think it was Mead or Hemp possibly came onto it and it was blocked on the line. And I sort of at the time thought that's the sort of pass only someone like Kirby is going to play. Obviously, a really, really good finish. It's the sort of thing that as a Chelsea fan, I've become quite accustomed to seeing. Like, I know Kirby's technical quality. It's very hard to say what foot she actually is, because she can do that on both sides. She can do that with, frightening regularity. I do think it's also one of those things. I do think Toon is a little bit unlucky in the fact she's behind Fran Kirby, in the same way I think Kelly's a bit unlucky in the fact that, Hemp and Mead on the wing, because it's players that for other nations would be, let's say, for example, Ella Toon is, I think, Norwegian. Let's say, for argument's sake, I think she'd quite easily step into that Norway midfield and would be starting for that Norway side. Or, if she's maybe Italian, I think quite easily you're looking at someone who's a star player there. But there's just such an amount of attacking quality in that Lionesses lineup. And I think it's about using it effectively and using it right. I do think, at the moment, it's very hard to argue how you drop Kirby, because I think she's got a goal or an assist in every single game. And I think as her fitness gets closer and closer, I don't think she's still fully match fit at the moment, but I think she's probably going to get there around the quarters and the semis. And then that's the sort of thing where in those games, she can be that match winner. And if, we're talking about tighter matches where you're looking at games where there's going to be a lot less chances, if you've got someone like Kirby that can produce something out of absolutely nothing, then that sort of puts you in a much better keel than maybe, rotating it and bringing Toon in when she hasn't played as much in the system.
Yeah, Nash, just throwing over to yourself in terms of Fran Kirby's performance, because as I said there, when we did the Rob, obviously you were on that show and we were talking about the Lionesses, when we were previewing the tournament. The question marks was over Kirby's fitness and whether, whether she was fully match fit yet or fully, ready for the tournament. But I think she has shown, I don't think there's any doubt in her ability. I don't think anyone who's watched women's football would never question her ability. But actually, what do you think on her performance yesterday and kind of her kind of tournament so far up to this point?
Well, I remember in the preview, in the one that I did, I said that about this team selection. I said Fran Kirby was a shock, and I maybe said that I would have replaced her for, say, like Steph Houghton at the time, because of obviously what Steph Houghton brings to the dressing room and things like that is a lot different to Kirby. And then obviously the tournaments happened. She started every game, and she's done really well. I think when I remember watching her in the Arnold Clark Cup, when they played at Molineux, when they won, and like I thought, is she going to be in the tournament? Like, she's always done well for England, and then it was one of them, is she going to be fit enough? But like, as she's been given her 55, 60 minutes, and like Rob said as well, Kirby's one of those players that can turn a game on its head just like that. I mean, last night the ball fell to her and she scored an absolutely great goal to get us on the way to 5 goals in the end. But like, she just took that out of nothing and scored. And like, it contradicts what I said, because I was like, yeah, I didn't think she'd get in, and she shouldn't be in really. I'd have took Steph, and then obviously she's proved me wrong. So, but yeah, I hope she goes on to score more and play a more pivotal role like she already has done. And I'm sure against the other teams, like the so-called bigger teams, if we ever face like France or Germany or anyone like that, hopefully she can find that key moment in that game if we're struggling, or turn the game in our favour once again.
Go on, Rob.
But one thing I will say, and again, this is another thing I'd probably give the mantra to Hemp and also to Mead, is that they're all big game players. Like, they are very, very good at turning up in big games. I've lost track of the number of finals I think Kirby's scored in, or semi-finals I've seen her score and assist in. The same with, Lauren Hemp. I know Hemp is the sort of player that could be having maybe, I don't necessarily think we see the best of her at the moment in the group stage. I think there's a lot more to see from her. I think she's played well, but I think there's that level of, like, that extra gear. She is the sort of player that I could see in one of those games, being so decisive and so important. I think Mead is another one where Mead is in that vein of form at the moment where you don't want it to end, and you almost go out. This is also why I don't think England rotated, is because players are in such a purple patch of form, and when you rotate them out, it sounds very strange, but even if players come in and do well, you can sometimes lose your own confidence, and you think, was I rotated? Was I rested? Was there a reason behind it happening? And sort of that self-doubt can come in. And I think Mead is just going into every single moment at this moment, thinking like every single player she's looking at and saying, I can have you, I can eat you for breakfast. And it's sort of that ability and being able to do that against, players that are very good defenders. When you start building the confidence and you do that on a regular basis, suddenly when you maybe, let's say, for example, you're staring at France and you're looking at, say, Yves Perisset and Wendy Renard, you're no longer looking at, 2 absolutely elite defenders. You're looking at 2 players and thinking, right, I can have you. And that's what I think, England is starting to get towards. I don't think we've seen anywhere near the best that England can produce. I don't think we've seen a performance at the moment in terms of difference application to the second half against the Netherlands, because I think that was something really, really special in the final sort of pre-tournament warm-up. And I think that's, when we face a better team and a better defence, that's the level we're going to need to reach.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think for me with Kirby, obviously being a United fan, obviously I wanted Tooney in the 11. Obviously, we're going to get to Russo in a moment, but yeah, I don't think you can deny. I think looking at it now, I think it has been the right decision to play her. I think she has been. She just does what she does best, and I think, like you said, I think we all said before the tournament, if she can get back to full fitness, I mean, by far one of England's better players in there. And you've led me on nicely to another player I wanted to talk about, because I think she is on course for probably getting on for player of the tournament should England go all the way and win this. You mentioned Beth Mead there, and obviously she's on 5 goals, 2 assists, I believe, already. Now, we're not even obviously we're just coming out of the group stages now. Ashley, I'll come to you first on this. How good has Beth Mead been? Because, I mean, well, she's a United fan as well, potentially. Get her over to United. That's never going to happen, but we can dream on. But how good has Beth Mead been for you? Because that right-hand side, linking up with Bronze as well has been fantastic.
Yeah, I think she's been outstanding. I can't remember which game it was, but I think they had the Arsenal manager in the like punditry area, and they were like, and she's kind of treating this as like a redemption tournament, because I remember Wiegman at the start, she backed Temp a lot, but I didn't think she was backing Mead as much. And then now it's like, Mead's got to be the first name on the team sheet all the time. She's the leading goal scorer of the tournament, I think, and then Russo's just behind her now as well. And it's like, Mead's she's another one of those players, as Rob was saying, like, that you can turn to, and it's like, that they're gonna show up, they're gonna play well. And then some of the goals she scored, like the one against Norway where she just dribbled past like 3 players and put it easily into the goals, made it look natural. Like some of these, you wouldn't, like some of these players, it's like I'd never dream of seeing that in a tournament, and she just waltzed through like 3 players and scored. Yeah, she's outstanding. Hopefully she does get player of the tournament, but I think probably quite a few of the England players are in for a run of player of the tournament at the moment, but it's still early days yet. We'll have to wait and see, but fingers crossed for Mead. I'm sure she'll carry on playing well.
And it was a nice finish yesterday as well, to be fair. Very nice little finish on the left into the bottom corner there. And I think, Rob, just throwing it back over to yourself, because I think I actually put Hemp down as being player of the tournament before obviously the tournament started, but Mead has completely shocked me. And I think if you look back as well, a couple of seasons ago, she was kind of not out of favour, but I think before Jonas came into Arsenal, I think we were talking about this yesterday in the stadium, that before Jonas came in, he just said to her, no, stop turning back on the ball, run at players. That's what you're good at. And now we're seeing Mead. I mean, the transformation's been incredible. But yeah, just talk to me about her and obviously her performance yesterday as well. Yeah,
I mean, like with Beth Mead, it's sort of every other fans are now waking up to what Chelsea fans have been like, ever since she's been at Sunderland, she has tormented us. I've gone on record multiple times. I've said I would rather see an Arsenal lineup that had Miedemar in than Beth Mead. I would, if you gave me a choice of one of them, I would say our defence can keep Miedemar quiet. Beth Mead, she always manages to find a pocket of space against us, or go past us, or save our annual worldie of the season against us. It is incredibly, incredibly frustrating. And she's probably in the top 5 players that I most love to hate. Unlike games where I see players like mark her out of the game, they are some of my favourite. One of the job last year that Nim Charles did on her in the FA Cup game is still one of my favourite games of the season, just because she shackled her. And that's an incredibly tough thing to do. And I'd say that in the best, most complimentary sort of way. In the same way, I think Carter, when she was able to shackle Lauren Hemp, it was one of the best defence performances I've seen of the season. Mead, I think, is probably going to end up winning the Golden Boot. I think, a lot of the obvious contenders, obviously Katoto, I will say, it was desperately disappointing to see the ACL injury, because I think, that's such a big blow for France and also for world football. Unbelievable player. But I think, with her injury, there's a few players. I think it's Spain. I think Leon has 2 possibly at the moment. I imagine that someone like Pernilla Harder, if Denmark do get through and continue to, she will probably be quite important to any attacking they do. But I do think it's sort of setting up quite well for Mead to get that, Golden Boot. And to be honest, in a way, like, if a player gets Golden Boot, it generally means their team and their country has done very, very well at the tournament. So I'm quite happy for her to get the Golden Boot if it means it comes home. Means I won't ever hear the end of it from Arsenal fans, and Adeval will no doubt be claiming it as Arsenal's first trophy in about 5 years. But I will accept that sacrifice.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think, Charlie, who's obviously a regular on here, is obviously a massive Beth Mead fan as well. I think the more I watch her, I just think what I actually loved, I think it was the Norway game. It was a very Arsenal panel, wasn't it? Because you had Ian Wright in the studio, you had Alex Scott, and you had Jonas, obviously the Arsenal manager, over there as well. So it was a very Arsenal, lineup they had there. And it was Ian Wright's reactions that just killed me during that game. And I think, it's, we can speak all night about Beth Mead, I think, because I agree with what you're saying. I think Toto probably was on for the goal, just with the group that I think France had. Obviously, getting that injury, I think, it has ruled her out. I'm just looking at this links very nicely into Russo, because I'm just looking at you talking about the Golden Boot race there. So Beth Mead's on 5, Russo's actually on 3, and she's actually ahead of Ellen White, and that leads me nicely into the conversation of. So Russo's actually got more goals than Ellen White now, but she's obviously played less minutes because of not starting the games. Is that the indication then that Russo should now be the starting striker? Has she done enough now to say, come on, like, I'm outscoring your striker here? Or is it the case of Serena's looking at going, well, this is working at the moment. Play this team to start with, tire out the opposition potentially, and then you bring on your Russo, your Toons, and Kelly and so on. Is that kind of how we're looking at it? Obviously, as a United fan, I'm going to be slightly biased and say I think it's almost a running joke on my Twitter timeline with United fans. Every time White misses a chance, it's Russo would have scored that. But that's just it's like a saved tweet of United fans. But I'll come over to you, Ashley, first, because you messaged me actually last night with very happy with obviously Russo's performance. Another to me, she's one of the best headers of the ball in the WSL. I think the amount of goals she scores with a head. But where do you sit on this debate then that that kind of starting striker role? Because personally, I think she's done enough now, to prove her way into the starting 11.
I'm kind of mixed because obviously Ellen White's been pretty much the centre forward for England that I've grown up watching since I've started watching women's football. Ellen White was always there, and I think because of she's just a prolific goal scorer anyway. Obviously Russo has done well coming off the bench and scoring that header last night, and then the other goal that she scored was one of the best goals I've seen of the tournament, really, the way she just spun him around and then finished so calmly. But I think Wiegman will probably still stick with White as the starting centre forward, because it's Ellen White, and I'm looking at it more of the angle it could be a last tournament. Obviously, I'm not sure how old she is. I think she's in her 30s, or she is 30. It could be a last tournament, and then obviously Russo is like the future, same as Beth England, who is one of the two players who hasn't had a kick in the tournament, just Beth England and Lottie Wubben-Moy. And I'm like, Beth England could have probably scored some of the ones as well that Ellen missed, or that Russo missed, that arguably sitter last night to get a hat-trick. People could say, oh, Beth England would have scored that, or Ellen White would have scored that. It's kind of a debate, but I do think Wiegman will stick with Ellen White because, as you said, it's working off the bench. Toon, Russo and Greenwood coming on together as the three at the same time. It's worked for them already, so why change a winning formula at the moment? Maybe see, if we start, it just depends who we get really, but I think White having the record goal scoring for the Lionesses as well, you can't really take her off, even though Russo's in good form. But obviously it'll be a debate that will keep going on and on and on. But I'd say just don't change your winning formula. Just stick to what is working, and hopefully we can go on. But I think Russo definitely will be the future. Russo and Beth England will be the two future centre forwards, 100%.
I thought you were going to start Rob off then, because that's what I can imagine. My Twitter timeline, whenever White missed the chances, Russo would have scored. I can imagine Rob's is very, England would have scored that. But I mean, Rob, where do you kind of stand on this? Because I think actually you are right. I think, well, obviously with World Cup being next year, maybe White's got one more in her potentially if you push it that far. But yeah. I think, to me, I just think I agree with what you're saying. I think you don't change, and there's a couple of people agreeing in the comments there, you don't change a winning formula, and I get that, and I think that's what Serena is doing. She's got her 11, she likes it, and that's why you see the same subs as well. But I just think in a game where you're only going to have a couple of chances, those chances might fall in the first half. You need a player. For me, White is, yes, she scored a couple of goals, but she's needed so many chances to score them, in my opinion. And I think if you're going to have a tight game, Spain or Denmark next round, potentially, we're going to, I don't know how the draw works. Potentially it's going to be Germany, I think, after that, isn't it? We're not going to get a whole load of chances. So where do you kind of stand on this debate? Would you change it now, or do you think we've gone into the tournament with this lineup, we've got to stick with this now?
I mean, it's like I'd say on that point about being clinical that Russo had 4 very good chances yesterday to score and only took 2 of them. So I don't think, I'm not, I can see the argument, and I think Russo is a terrific, centre forward. I think she's naturally in that mould of the White sort of player. I think, people look at Alessia Russo, and while she's very good at dribbling with the ball and also very technical, I think people don't realise what a very good 9 she is in terms of her aerial ability, her leap, sort of that style of player, which I think is something that, the Lionesses needed to sort out a longer-term replacement for Ellen White. And I think, Russo is definitely a very, very credible solution in that regard. I do think that, I do certainly think that White, with her level of experience and nous, and I'm going to go ahead and say it. What people will call her footballing intelligence. Let's go for that phrase. I think that's the best way to describe it. I think that's what Russo doesn't quite have yet. There, she's not quite. She's still young and wide-eyed and doesn't have quite that wily, that wily sense you need of a centre forward to be able to win a penalty or sort of, to con the referee. Whether we like it or not, it is part of the game nowadays. And I think, in big games, you ultimately go for your more experienced players. I do think it is a very good thing that we do have multiple options up there, and it is a case that, if White did get injured, you've got the very credible option of bringing on Beth England or bringing on, Lesia Russo. I think you could also play Mead up front. I've sort of said this at some point. I'd like to see Beth Mead get a chance up front, just to also fit, Kelly into the starting lineup and just, have them just completely, utterly tearing opponents apart. But yeah, I think it's harsh to write White off just because she didn't score in sort of one game yesterday against Northern Ireland. That admittedly, there was a few chances in the first half, but it wasn't as if she had that one chance that maybe she should have put away that went just wide, but it wasn't as if there were loads of clear-cut chances in that first half. And I don't think she missed an awful lot of sort of yeah, some of the White, the work rate she also does put in from the front, I think is something you have to acknowledge. And I think that's something maybe Russo does need to work out a little bit in her game. And it's something I think that comes with age, is you just get more used to the pressing and doing the bits of being a centre forward that you don't really enjoy. And that's something I've noticed Beth England got really, really good at in the last year. Like when she has played for Chelsea and come in 100% effort, 100% application, and also a very good finisher. I am a little bit surprised she hasn't got, chances, but at the same time, you have to say with Russo's goals per minute this tournament must be, I don't know, roughly about every 30 minutes in terms of the length of substitution appearances she's had. And I don't think you can therefore, argue and say it's a bad decision. But I do think at the moment, like for example, maybe if, in the next round, White doesn't score, Russo comes on and, completely changes the game off the bench, maybe you then have the conversation for it. But unless there's a real creditable change. That said, for the World Cup next year, I do think, and also given the fact it'll be in Australia and New Zealand, and so you'll have a different temperate and climate to deal with, I do think Lesia Russo should lead the line in that tournament.
Yeah, 100%. And just TJ bringing it your comment here, if you're on about Nikita Paris there, she is the best player in the world if she joins United. I will not have any slander on any United girls that potentially come across. I know you're a United fan, but I'm not having that, even though it may or may not be true. But just floating about around, I want to look at the back line a little bit then, because as we've kind of touched on here, it wasn't really, and it was never really going to be a full test yesterday. Northern Ireland with the squad that they've got, they've actually done really well, I thought, this tournament, in the positions that they're in. I think the story that was I think that they've actually got their third choice keeper, I think, actually plays for Wolves, who are obviously in tier 3. That's a massive story in itself. So I think, they've done incredibly well. But just looking at it as a whole, England's backline, as we've said across this kind of last half an hour, have not been tested at all. Now, I think for me, that's a little bit of a worry, because I'll come to each of you actually before I give my thoughts on this. But actually, I'll come to you first in terms of, is it a worry that this backline's not been fully tested yet? And there might be a little bit of a shock when we come up against a team that, come at us and have a lot of chances. I know you could argue Norway did a little bit in the first 5-10 minutes, but it wasn't, for the full 90. Do you think that's a little bit of a worry that we've not had a full test yet? Or
I think it's just hard to determine, because obviously we did play against Netherlands, and we have played other friendlies where Vegan was trying out the different centre half pairings, and she was trying to see who the first choice was. Lucy Bronze, Rachel Daly, Greenwood could do a job at left back, Demi Stokes is left back, Daly could go right back as well. There's all the different options. I think it's worrying in a way, because obviously France and that are scoring goals for fun as well. But I think it's one of them. If you want to win a tournament, you have to be ready. And if the defence haven't had a test yet, they're still going to be ready to face some of the best players in the world. I mean, they face Hegerberg, and she did pretty much nothing, and they had her pretty controlled. Brighton, Williamson had her quite controlled. It just depends how you kind of view it. I'm not going to make comments, it's worrying, but I'm just going to wait and see how they do, who we get in the next round, and then, it's knockout football. Then everything matters, and then we'll see how they cope with. If it is not Denmark, then it'll be harder and and then the Spanish also have decent forwards too. It just depends on how they play on the day. But I'm not concerned. They're like, as me and Rob have said, that they're all experienced players. I mean, Millie Bright for Chelsea last season, outstanding. Leah Williamson for Arsenal, arguably didn't put a foot wrong very often. I know she has a couple of mistakes, but every defender does, and I think they'll be okay. But it's one of them. It's just how they play on the day and how the attacking line up their face plays too.
Yeah, and Robin, same question to yourself. Do you think, Ashley mentioned some of the experienced players there? Is that what is gonna bode them well? Obviously, defensive wise, that they've not been fully tested, but you look at that back line; it's a very experienced back line for the most fans, particularly in obviously in the WSL as well. There.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, someone else has mentioned it in the comments about Kira Walsh. Again, Kira Walsh's new nickname for me when I do things is Henry, because she's just a Hoover. Just hoovers absolutely everything up. And I think, I've said to a lot of people, I think Walsh is City's most important player, because when she's in that midfield, it looks so much more calmer and so much more controlled. I think it's the sort of role that the best compliment I can give, and I've said this to a couple of people, is that when she's there, you don't really notice her. She doesn't stand out. But when she's not there, the absence sticks out like a sore thumb. And I think that, I predicted Kira Walsh to be player of the tournament. Instead of England do well, Walsh and, in that midfield will have a really good tournament. And, so far have been proven sort of to be cracked. I do think, people saying about Norway not necessarily being the sort of as good as we thought. On the flip side of that, we also have to admit that, the defence shackled arguably the best centre forward in the game. Arguably two of the best creative forces in the game. And while Norway were poor, that also doesn't, come down to sort of, just due to them being poor. I think, Bright and Williamson at the back have a very good combination. What Bright is very good at is perhaps some of the stuff that Williamson isn't necessarily, the top defender at. And the same way what Williamson is better at, Bright doesn't necessarily always excel at. I think in Daly and Bronze, you've got players with recovery pace and real engines on them. And I think that's important in this system. And again, with Walsh and Walsh's ability in there to drop in. As someone said about, Austria and Northern Ireland did stop Hegerberg, I agree. And I'm not saying, that, but in terms of I don't think you can hold it against England and say that the fact we haven't had a test yet is, some sort of negative factor. Because for the tournament, again, that game against the Netherlands, for example, in that second half, they played Miedemar. And Miedemar was kept quiet. I don't think it's a case that we're looking at it, we're coming into this complete false dichotomy, and whenever we come against any decent side, we're going to get found out. Again, I appreciate people don't like the Arnold Clark Cup, and I think, more is that's made over it, but we did play the Arnold Clark Cup. We did play very good sides in the Arnold Clark Cup in Germany, Spain, and Canada. And in all of those, we kept very good attacking players quiet again. I don't think it's as if there's a lack of the experience and the knowledge and know how to do it.
Yeah, 100%. And James, just maybe clicked the wrong one. Someone that I can't remember who it was, but two of the Norway girls just walked straight off yesterday. I've not actually seen that at a women's game yet. They didn't go over to the Norway fans that are in the corner. They just went straight off and down the tunnel, which I've not seen at all. And Bo Risa came up, towards the end as well, and her family was biased. And I don't think I've ever seen a team so distraught as that. But they didn't deserve it. Norway, unfortunately, they were shockingly bad, very disappointing. But throwing it back around to England then now. Before we look to kind of wrap this up, I just want to look at two things in terms of, are there any weaknesses in this England side that you think we need to address? Anything that we've seen pre-tournament that's kind of carried into the tournament that we think we need to potentially work on? Is there any areas, or is everything fine and we're going to win every game now? How are we kind of looking from that front? But Ashley, I'll come to you first on that one. Is there anything that you've seen in the games that you're slightly concerned about, or are you pretty fully confident now that this team is fully firing?
I haven't really seen any weaknesses. Obviously, we struggled to break down Northern Ireland a little bit last night in the first, I'd say, half hour-ish. I mean, we had a couple of chances, that Ellen White missed that one that Lucy Bronze played through. Lucy Bronze missed a header that arguably she should have scored. But I think you can't really knock them when they took their chances. I mean, we've scored 14 goals in the group, which is like the most goals scored in a group stage, I think, or something similar to that they said that the record was broken. And obviously we can't say they're going to go and win everything because we don't know what's going to happen in the quarterfinal, semi, and then if we get there, the final, we don't know what's going to happen. But I think there isn't any weaknesses that I could see. Rob might say something different to me. But from what I could see, everyone looks solid and they're all up for it. We've got decent players who can come off the bench. I mean, every single player on that bench could come on and make a difference in some way. Arguably, in my opinion, if we're up against it, we need a goal. There's people on there that can come on and create something. So I think we'll be okay. I think it's just one of them that we just got to wait and see, because obviously I don't want to go, yeah, we're going to win, we're going to go and smash it and everything, because we obviously don't know what's going to happen on Wednesday and then so on. So, but I don't think there's anything that I can pick out. Rob, I'll hand it to you. You might have some.
I think my only concern would be if Walsh gets injured. I think a lot of the system relies a lot around Walsh and Walsh's ability to pick up. I think Scott is a good player to fit in there, but she's no Kira Walsh, and I don't think that's, a snipe on her. I think you could maybe ask Williamson to do part of the element of the role, but I don't necessarily think she does it as well. Again, the space is interesting. The spacing behind the fullbacks is a big thing that I do think England do at times. At the moment, haven't really come up against a team that have, wingers that can exploit it. And if you come up against maybe someone like Germany, for example, where they've got so many good, fast attacking players, you potentially have that issue and dealing with that. And at times we saw Northern Ireland, getting in behind yesterday and sort of getting in behind to do it. In terms of France, again, you've got people like France now. It'll be interesting to see what France do without Katoto in there, because they've got Sarr to come in as, that centre forward, but it's whether they choose to maybe go for a more fluid system and bring Cascarino in, or put Bacca into that, front three and go more fluid, because they have the facilities to do that, and then maybe play Darnay in as a false nine. I think that's maybe the sort of team England could struggle against, is when you have a false nine playing and you've got someone who's going to drop into space and pull the sort of line up and pull the line out, because at the moment we haven't really seen the lines tested. And if you start breaking that line and bypassing Walsh in that midfield where she's sort of cutting everything out, then potentially there's a lot of space in behind that you can exploit. That said, at the same time, I've got no reason to see why Serena wouldn't account for that, and why, if there were, situations, she would ask the lines to possibly push back a little bit more. And we also, I do know Serena can be pragmatic if she needs. If England were, 1-0 up going into the last 10 minutes against someone, I'm sure you'd see different substitutes than the ones we're seeing, just because I'm sure she'd make changes to accommodate that.
I think with the space as well, I've just actually thought of this. This is like one little thing that I remember from like the Austria game. I don't know if it was the nerves but I noticed that Lucy Bronze, Rachel Daly were, when they did get down the lines a little bit, they didn't stop the cross. They were still on the edge of like the 18 yards on like the side, and letting their player just put a cross in. I mean, Millie Bright and Leah Williamson and all them can win the headers quite comfortably against certain teams like that. But, against, as we were saying, France and Germany, you've got a lot of pace, can get in behind quickly. If Lucy Bronze and Daly don't stop that ball in, or whoever's playing at the back, whether it be Bronze, Daly, Carter, Stokes, whoever, if they don't stop the ball in, that could be, obviously depending on how the attackers attack the ball. If it's a header, I'm backing Bright and Williamson probably to win most of them. But, stopping that cross maybe is a little weakness that I noticed a couple of times, but it just depends how they might close it down. Vegan might be like, look, you need to stop this player getting the ball in or whatever against the other teams. But that was just a little thing for me as well.
Yeah, I asked that question because I think that was the two areas for me. It's the fullbacks. I think I'm a little bit particular on Daly's side. I think there's a lot of space there. She has got the pace to get back in there, but I think against Germany are the one team I'm looking at thinking that forward line, you give them one or two chances, they're scoring both of them in there. I'll come to your question in a second, Rob. But I'm going to ask each of you a question first, because it was something after the game that, I mean, he's a controversial character, Kenny Shields, but his little comment that he made, I do have to bring it up. everyone else should just go home. It'll be a massive failure if England don't win this tournament. Now, I'm bringing that up for the sole reason because it kind of ties into my question I was going to ask you both anyway. From what you've seen in the tournament so far, are England going to go all the way in this? And would it be a failure, I guess, if England don't win it? Because to me, no. But, I don't know what you two think on that one. I don't know if either of you can go first on that.
Ash, the floor's all yours.
I don't think it'd be a failure. Obviously, I think it'd be disappointing because of how well we've done so far. I think but it's one of them. Like, I think what this Euros has done as a whole for women's football is a lot more important than, say, England winning or whoever wins. To me, obviously, I'd love it to be England. It's a home tournament, home nation. All of the players, want to do it for like personal reasons and different things like that. But I think it's more for me looking at what the tournament's done as a whole. For women's football, like you've seen record attendances. Whether England get to the final or not, it's still set to be a record crowd at Wembley, and it's the biggest ever Euros crowd ever for a final, including men's football as well. Apparently, so I've read. So like for me, yes, it'd be disappointing if we didn't because of how well we've done so far. But we have, as we keep going back to it, we haven't really been tested yet. So say if we played France and we lost to them by quite a bit, but we lost, narrowly to them, it would be disappointing, but it kind of be, we tried our best to win, and sometimes the better team has to win a tournament, and if they are better, then that's what happens. But yeah, I'm just trying to look at it at the angle about how much women's football is going to grow from this tournament, not only in England but all over the world. I mean, you've seen all the other fans come over and cheer their teams on. Northern Ireland yesterday, they got knocked out, hadn't got a single point in the tournament, but when they scored against Norway, and last night they were still celebrating with all their fans, and none of them were disheartened or upset. They were like, we've got to a tournament for like the first time, and like that's the kind of thing that I like to see overall. How happy teams are just to have represented their country at a major tournament is a massive thing.
Yeah, very, very well said. Firstly, again, congratulations to Northern Ireland for even being at the Euros, because there are much more established nations in the women's game that haven't made it there. And like the fact they got there, that was achievement in itself. Secondly, Kenny Shields is an idiot, and he should get media training. He says so many stupid things, and quite frankly, like, a lot of the Northern Ireland women deserve better than some of the comments, some of the crass sort of verbatim that he comes out with. And before I say anything, it'll get me really into trouble. And potentially get liable. I don't necessarily think it's a failure. I think, Serena, if we lose to a better side and they're better than us because they're genuinely better than us, I don't think Serena will mind. I think if we lose to a side because we've not put the effort in, or, we put a performance in that's so below par, I think that's when it will be considered, disappointing. I think the semis as a minimum should be an expectation now, because I don't think, both Denmark and Spain, with the best respect to them, I think, England at their best can beat both of them. Obviously, once you get to a semi-finals, you're 90 minutes away from final. It's sort of, you never know. They're usually tight, tense affairs. They're rarely, goal heavy. And then, when you get to a final, it's a similar sort of equation. No one really cares how, you play in a final. People care if you win or lose in the final. My random question I did have, again, I was at the stadium. How on earth did VAR overrule the penalty? Because if there was something in the build-up that they missed, because on the screen all we got was no handball. If that isn't counted as a handball, then I must have missed some sort of new rule in football where you can just sort of, turn into a volleyball player briefly and block shots. Because it was one of the most blatant handballs I've seen a lot. So was there something in the build-up? And again, if either of you can shed any light on this, anyone in the comments can shed any light on it as to how it wasn't given.
Is this the England game?
Yeah, the England game, the VAR checking stuff.
It's because in the build-up, I can't remember. It hit Beth Mead on the arm first. Before it, and then after that, obviously, it fell to, I can't remember who shot it. And then when they shot, it hit their arm, but obviously because there was handball in the build-up by me, they couldn't give the penalty for it.
See, it would have been lovely to actually know that in the stadium as opposed to just getting, VAR checking progress on. So that's my one gripe, I think, really, with this tournament. We've had various conversations about refereeing and VAR in general, Connor, but my real gripe at this tournament at the moment is that there's world-class football being let down by subpar refereeing, and it's not necessarily always the referee's fault, but I do think that's, reflecting quite badly on the tournament as a whole.
No, I tend to agree with that. I tweeted that the other day, actually, that I think it's ruining a good tournament, in my opinion. The one in the France game was horrendous. I was at Austria-Norway yesterday. There was a couple of VAR decisions in there. Like, you could clearly see, but it went on for like 2 minutes. Checking something, it's like, come on. Like, there's nothing in that. But hopefully it doesn't overshadow the tournament. I'd absolutely hate for it to get to the final and VAR is the talking point coming out of the way of the final. We don't want that. That happens enough in men's football. Cool. We'll look to wrap it up there then. Thank you, Ashley and Rob, for coming on this Saturday evening. I'm sure you'll both be on in the next few weeks as England progress, because, as I agree with you, Rob, I can't see Denmark or Spain being too much of a challenge for England. However, when we get to the semi-finals, that's when it really starts to ramp up. Anyone who's watched the channel over the last few weeks, my bet is out the window now because Norway got knocked out. So I've lost. My player of the tournament was Hemp, and that's not going to happen. My golden boot was Katoto. That's not going to happen. My winner was Norway, so that's not going to happen either. So just don't listen to me when it comes to predictions. Listen to Charlie. If anyone looks at the All United Predictions League, she is absolutely flying when it comes to that. So you have to listen to her when it comes to predictions. We will be back potentially. It all depends when United announce the next signing, which is looking like it's going to be Maya Letitia, potentially. We've got a few more names linked in there as well. So we'll be live again when that happens, Monday or Tuesday, potentially. We'll be back on Tuesday regardless. Then Wednesday, no show Wednesday, because obviously England, back Thursday and back Friday as well. But keep an eye on all the Twitter for that. But for now, guys, we'll see you guys soon. Cheers, everyone.